Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has called for an investigation into the transnational criminal organization seeking to steal the country's international gold reserves. The number of confirmed coronavirus cases per day in the U.S. climbed at an all-time high for more than 50,000 on Thursday. Palestinian organization Hamas and Al-Fatah have announced a coalition to oppose and resist Israel's illegal plans to annex parts of the West Bank. Hello, today is Friday, June the 3rd, from the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm Ernesto Dominguez. And we start in Venezuela, where President Nicolás Maduro welcomed the agreement reached between his government and the European Union to strengthen mechanisms for bilateral dialogue.
And to proceed to a new stage of dialogue between Josep Borrell and Jorge Arreaza. And that is what has been done. I think it is the best, the most intelligent, the appropriate thing to do, and also what corresponds to what we are looking for, that the world hears the truth of Venezuela, that the European Union enters into another understanding, that there be a profound historic rectification of the role that the European Union has played in its relationship with Venezuela. That's why I salute you. The joint communique signed by Mr. Josep Borrell and Mr. Jorge Arreaza on behalf of the High Representative of the European Union and the Foreign Minister of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. And I ask for the full support of Venezuelan public opinion for this necessary diplomatic agreement and the applause for our people for these steps of peaceful diplomacy.
And in an interview with Telesur, Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza stressed the Venezuelan government has agreed with the European Union to strengthen mechanisms for bilateral dialogue in order to avoid an impasse in diplomatic relations.
The Bolivarian Revolution principles were maintained. There is a commitment to upgrade talks at the highest level between the European Union Permanent Representative and myself, in order to maintain talks in real time, so misinformation does not occur, as well as to make the vision of the Venezuelan government clear. In this way, we can correct any kind of differences or disputes regarding bilateral relations and reinforce the cooperation between Venezuela and the European Union, which is strategic cooperation.
And also this Thursday, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez announced the existence of a transnational criminal organization headed by opposition lawmaker Juan Guaidó that seeks to steal Venezuela's gold reserves.
The President of the Republic has specifically requested that we keep our population informed about the aggressions of the extremistic group of Venezuelan politicians who have established themselves as a transnational criminal organizations in order to take control of the assets of the Venezuelan people. Today, as is known, an English judge adopted an extravagant decision on the recognition of the absurd deputy Juan Guaidó as the supposed head of state in Venezuela.
The Venezuelan Vice President announced that President Nicolás Maduro has requested an investigation into the transnational criminal organization seeking to steal the country's international gold reserves.
Today, President Nicolás Maduro, in his capacity as head of state, in his capacity as head of government, has asked, he requested that the judicial institutions in Venezuela immediately open an investigation to determine the criminal responsibility of those who are part of this blatant theft, this piracy of Venezuelan gold. To protect all our people, an immediate investigation should be opened, in addition to the international actions that the Attorney General of the Republic is already preparing to enact in the face of this situation. This gold belongs to Venezuelans, not to this band of thieves that intends to pay the United Kingdom for political favors with the territory of Venezuela and with the resources and with our.
The Venezuelan Vice President also offered an update on COVID-19 figures this Thursday. Delcy Rodriguez reported 157 locally transmitted COVID-19 cases and 3 deaths in the last 24 hours. The vice president also reported 54 imported cases, of which 35 came from Colombia, 7 from Brazil, 2 from Peru, 1 from Ecuador, and 9 cases were people who had contact with others who had returned from abroad. The Venezuelan official also noted that there is no more effective preventative measures than social distancing. Venezuela's COVID-19 figures now stand at more than 6,000 positive cases and 54 fatalities. In Peru, healthcare workers take care of patients with COVID-19 at the Sobogal Hospital in Lima as the country surpasses 10,000 deaths from the coronavirus. The number of deaths rose to 10,045, an increase of 185 in the last 24 hours, while the number of people infected rose to 292,004, informed the health ministry. Peru is Latin America's second worst hit country after Brazil, where, according to official figures, more than 60,000 people have died from the disease. Peru's victims include 71 health workers and 153 police officers, according to officials. This Thursday, the de facto government of Bolivia announced that Minister of the Presidency Yerko Núñez tested positive for COVID-19 after being subjected to a diagnostic test as they had presented symptoms of the viral outbreak. The Minister of Health, Adi Roca, indicated that Núñez is in stable conditions and remains isolated as a preventative method to avoid possible infections. Likewise, Minister Roca pointed out that the infection could have been caused by contact with the person carrying the virus during his travel to different regions of the country, accompanied by other cabinet members. And now we go to Bolivia, where circuses have been empty tents for past months as the lockdown force chose to close to reduce the spread of the novel coronavirus. When the government announced its March that shows were banned, the Jumbo Circus crew had just finished setting its tent in a suburb of the Alto city.
We never thought we'd depend on this, for example, wedding, and making money by wedding. I've always wanted to work as a clown, to do artistry, to do many things that I have always wanted to do in the circus. But we have to look for other methods and ways to make money, to generate money. There is no option because we need to eat and earn our daily living.
With the beginning of dry season in Brazil, environmental experts and Brazilian forest authorities have warned that the Amazon rainforest is once again threatened by wildfires. The number of wildfires in the Brazilian Amazon increased by 19.5% in June in comparison to last year. According to data published by government agencies, more than 2,000 fires occurred, representing the worst figure for that month in 13 years. These figures and the excessive practice of deforestation are providing a worse scenario than that of 2019, when millions of hectares of tropical rainforest and animal and plant species were wiped out by the fires. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador denounced on Thursday the act of corruption after the order to release José Ángel Casarrubias Salgado, known as El Mochomo, alleged responsible for the disappearance of the 43 Ayotzinapa students.
An investigation was initiated and the search for the reason why he had been released. We were presented with a report holding evidence on how there is a corruption in the court that ordered his release. That is to say that there was money involved. Then it is going to be a punishment to those responsible.
And we're taking a very short break now, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. A large presence of national observers will characterize the general elections to be held in Sunday in Dominican Republic. Local electoral observation will mainly be the responsibility of political parties, which will have more than 500,000 representatives in charge of monitoring all phases of the process in the 16,000 polling stations across the country. The observers from political organizations will be joined by 2,500 observers from the Participación Ciudadana civil society organization. Regarding international observation of the election, the Organization of American States will send a delegation of 80 people, while the Inter-American Union of Electoral Organizations will send 6, and the diplomatic corps accredited in the Dominican Republic will be represented by 20 diplomats. And we stayed in Dominican Republic, where health authorities reported another 810 COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours and 11 deaths. Minister of Public Health Rafael Sanchez called for extreme measures given the rise in cases that has been seen lately, following the economic reopening of the country and the lifting of the curfew, and especially now that airports and tourism facilities were reopened. U.S. prosecutors late on Wednesday filed a lawsuit to seize the gasoline abroad for tankers that Iran is shipping to Venezuela, the latest attempt by the Trump administration to increase economic pressures on the two U.S. foes. The lawsuit was followed by Thursday by a warrant issued by U.S. District Judge James Borser for the seizure of the more than 1.1 million barrels of gasoline in the four tankers. Legal sources said that gasoline could likely only be seized by U.S. authorities if the tankers enter U.S. territorial waters. Gasoline shortages in Venezuela, like Iran, a member of OPEC, have grown acute due to U.S. sanctions, and the country has undergone an economic collapse. Still, President Nicolás Maduro has held on, and the failure to unseat him has frustrated U.S. President Donald Trump. The number of confirmed coronavirus cases per day in the U.S. climbed at an all-time high of more than 50,000 on Thursday, with the infection curve rising in 40 of the 50 states in a reversal that has largely spared only the Northeast. An alarming 36 states are seeing an increase in the percentage of tests coming back positive for the virus. The U.S. recorded 50,700 new confirmed cases, according to a tally kept by Johns Hopkins University. That represents a doubling of the daily total over the past month and is higher even than what the country witnessed during the most lethal phase of the crisis in April and May, when the New York metropolitan area was easily the worst hotspot in the U.S. In a defeat for President Donald Trump's anti-immigration policies, the United States federal judge has overturned a Trump administration rule requiring migrants to first claim asylum in another country before seeking entry to the U.S. The Trump rule, rushed into place in 2019, was aimed at blocking migrants from the Central American countries of El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala from claiming asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border. The federal judge ruling in Washington, D.C., found the Trump administration's ban on asylum seekers at the border violated U.S. immigration law and administrative procedures that required public notice of major rule changes. The U.S. Immigration and Nationality Act allows anyone who has made it to U.S. soil to apply for asylum. Moscow on Thursday denied allegations that Russia had sold arms to the Taliban and instead accused the United States of supplying ISIS fighters with helicopters.
It is well known that Russia has always supplied with arms only the legitimate government of Afghanistan. If American colleagues intend to have a conversation in this context, it is appropriate to mention that information that has been circulated actively in Afghanistan about U.S. Special Services supplying ISIS, Islamic State group, fighters with helicopters. We were talking a lot about these helicopters with our identification at the briefings a year and a half ago.
We stay in Russia, where President Vladimir Putin thanked the Russian people for their support for the constitutional amendments on this Thursday.
The results of the nationwide vote show that a vast majority of Russian citizens believe that we can work better, that broad government, from local authorities to the president, have to do everything to meet people's high expectations. I would like to address Russian citizens again to express my sincere words of gratitude. I also understand our citizens who voted against constitutional amendments. It's true that we will still have lots of unsolved issues. People often encounter injustice, obduracy, and indifference. Many are still living in difficult and harsh conditions, while the government believes that we are doing our best.
Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova stressed on Thursday that the United States needs to refrain from interfering in domestic affairs of other countries. Washington is especially concerned with the provision in the amendments that would potentially allow President Putin to remain in power until 2036. The Russian diplomat pointed out that the Americans needed to sort out its domestic issues. It's high time for them all to brace themselves and overcome the deepest economic or domestic divisions, Zakharova noted.
First, we received a note from the embassy of the United States. This note regarded the annual report of the Department of State of the United States on the counter-terrorist efforts, and we thank them for this kind reminder, because we have lost practical interest in them year in, year out. We see the same politicized phrasings and this includes unfounded reproaches to us in our efforts in anti-terrorist efforts, because they say that our counter-terrorist measures are aimed not at fighting terrorism, but at stifling different freedoms and violating human rights in our government. Well, who's talking? First, we received
In Japan, health authorities recorded a record number of new COVID-19 cases in Tokyo on Thursday. Meanwhile, Tokyo's governor, Yuriko Koike, called on citizens to refrain from going out to popular nightlife areas and to avoid crowded districts.
Today's number of positive COVID-19 cases is 107 people. Under the state of emergency on May 2nd, there were 154 people, but it exceeded 100 people to the first time in 2 months. Regarding the breakdown, young people in their 20s and 30s are increasing as well as today. Based on analysis of experts, we are at a stage that we should be aware that we should be cautious about the spread of infection to the citizens of Tokyo and businesses. I hope you will share the common awareness. During the time of business closure, request and state of emergency, I think everyone had to be patient. I think returning to that situation is not desirable to anyone. If that's the case, I would like to ask for everyone's cooperation.
And we have more stories coming up after this final break, so stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. Palestinian organizations Hamas and Al-Fatah have announced a coalition to oppose and resist Israel's illegal plans to annex parts of the West Bank and to ensure national unity in the struggle.
We are in the corner. We will not raise white flag. We will not surrender. We will not give up. All the options are open if we reach the situation that the Israelis start the annexation and slamming the door for the two-state solution.
We declare in this conference the position of the political leadership of the Fatah and Hamas movement and the other factions, and we ask everyone to engage in joint action to confront the annexation plan. We must defend our people against settler attacks on our villages. We must defend our people against the aggression of the occupation. Therefore, we will use all kinds of struggle and resistance against the annexation project.
Diplomatic tensions continues to escalate between Turkey and France as Turkey's foreign minister demanded an apology from the French government on Thursday over the naval incidents that occurred in the Mediterranean Sea in June.
France has not told the truth here to the EU or the NATO. To claim that our vessels locked onto French vessels are not true. We have proven this with reports and documents and gave them to NATO. And NATO saw the truth. Instead of engaging in anti-Turkish activities and such leanings, France needs to make a sincere confession. Our expectation from France at the moment is for it to apologize in a clear fashion, without ifs or buts, for not providing the correct information.
Indian health authorities carried out COVID-19 tests in the city of Mumbai on Thursday as infections continue to rise across the country. The total number of confirmed cases has now surpassed 620,000, of which almost 22,000 cases were recorded in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Indian health authorities have stressed that over 200,000 COVID-19 tests are being conducted per day. The death toll stands at more than 18,000, while almost 380,000 patients have recovered from the virus. Demonstrators took to the streets in Mali's capital, Bamako, this Thursday to demand the release of abducted opposition leader Soumaïla Cissé, missing for 100 days. Cissé was abducted on March 25th following an electoral campaign activity in the Timbuktu region. The leader of the Union for the Republic and Democracy Party had called for the resignation of Malian President Ibrahim Boubacar. Meanwhile, Cissé's followers have claimed this was a political abduction, as none of the terrorist groups in the region have claimed responsibility. Meanwhile, Malian opposition leader Mahmoud Dicko has called for demonstrations on July 10th to push for government reform, including the renewal of Mali's highest court and the formation of a government of national unity.
This day is special for us, for the simple reason that we have been without Soumaïla Cissé for 100 days. 100 days deprived of the life of our mother, of the political balance in Mali that Soumaïla Cissé has represented for more than 2 decades. Of course, I'm still hopeful when the President of the Republic says that today Soumaïla was spotted. Well, when the President says that Somalia has been spotted, I'm pretty sure that Somalia is alive.
Explosions were seen in Sana'a, Yemen's capital and largest city, on Thursday after the Saudi Arabia-led military coalition confirmed it has launched a major operation against the Houthi movement.
What happened last night was bombing and hitting this store, Oman oil store, and this is what happened in Swar, hit a household amplias factory. This process, launched by the coalition, this is their goal that you see, bombardment of warehouses, factories, and everything vital related to the citizens, from facilities, infrastructure, factories, and everything related to the livelihood of these people. Last night, 2 airstrikes hit us, bombing the residential neighborhood and this place, exposing most of the houses to destruction. We have children in hospitals, and we have pregnant women having miscarriages. It is a catastrophe and a major crime. They neither consider the place and its sanctity nor the sanctity of the inhabitants.
Health authorities in Cameroon have received a donation of 183 medical oxygen concentrators to support the country's fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. The donation was delivered by WHO representative for Cameroon and Rwanda, Fanuel Havimana. Cameroonian health authorities have reported over 12,500 coronavirus cases and a death toll of 313. Meanwhile, over 10,100 patients have recovered from the virus. Schools, universities, and training centers have been allowed to reopen following the lifting of a lockdown nationwide, which was in place since March. As a second wave of locusts threatens to devour East Africa's crops, scientists in the Nairobi lab are experimenting with novel ways to kill them. Swarms are the worst for 3 generations, encouraged by unseasonably wet weather and dispersed by a record number of cyclones. The destructive pests could cost East Africa and Yemen $8.5 billion this year, the World Bank has said. Locusts are usually controlled by spraying them with pesticides before they can fly, by the chemicals and damage other insects and the environment. So scientists at the International Center of Insect Psychology and Ecology, ICIPE, are experimenting with biopesticides and the use of locusts on human and animal food as they look for environmental-friendly extermination methods. It poison them, even use stent to drive them to cannibalism.
If you go to some of those remote areas where the locust swarms are actually prevailing, a lot of people are eating them. So we think with this background, we think it's something to promote so that a lot more people should engage in this practice rather than shying away, thinking that it is a primitive man's food.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And as I always say, you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Ernesto Dominguez. Thank you for watching.